tonight, and I'm particularly excited to see it. About 20 years ago, when I was still working with the Forest Service, I was told to do research on the Unicoi Turnpike. I had to figure out what the heck that was, but you're going to find out tonight, so I won't tell you. We were kind of restricted to the Georgia area and the areas that are either on or close to the National Forest land. And almost at the time we finished doing our basic research with the year 2000 GPS units and stuff like that, the whole thing fell apart. There was some sort of objection, which I didn't know about until much later, to doing it. But in a sort of historic background, the Unicoi Turnpike was originally a trail that led from the upper end of transportation of water transportation on the Savannah and its tributaries, which started about where Toccoa is today, just outside of Toccoa, and led across 3-4 counties and up into North Carolina and then Tennessee to get goods from the coast to these interior communities and vice versa. Things that they produced got back down to be sold. But there was nothing but a trail. And a group of 4 or 5, it depends on which story you get, entrepreneurs who had a stake in the whole operation decided to put together a contract to do a wagon trail. One of them was asked to go up to the Fort Loudon to sell cotton gins. And he was a city boy. He spent his time in wagons and fancy four-wheel vehicles, and he had to ride on a horse all the way up. So he was pretty saddle-sore by the time he got back. And he was a fierce supporter of the idea of a real road. And so what they ended up doing was dealing with the 5 entities. The Cherokee Nation was where this thing crossed, so there's a lot of land, a lot of area in the Cherokee Nation. The Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee governments had to have a say-so. So they had to get blessed by all these organizations, and they managed to pull it off. And so by 1818, or 1819 I think it was, there was announcements in the papers of all the communities in all directions all around here to say that the trail was open for use. That meant that the trail had been built so it'd be 20 feet wide, unless they had to, bridge it or something. They could do 12 feet wide. The idea to be able to pass wagons, as well as herds of animals. And you're going to hear about those, I think, too. But anyway, the idea is that we are looking at, or we're going to hear tonight about this operation that started 4 years ago? So 3 years ago, whatever. And so it's a major, very early interstate highway. And it was a major operation for commerce in both directions. The story you're going to hear tonight was put together by a couple of folks, one professor at UNG in Gainesville, and our speaker tonight is Alan Hall, who lives up in the Saltina Coochie area, and he has been interested in it for a long time. And so the two of them got together with Professor McDonald's high-tech toys, and they did a much more detailed job than we could ever have done 20 years ago. Think of technology that you had then and what you have now. That's the kind of difference we're talking about. I think perhaps that's enough said for me. Alan, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I thank you for coming to speak to us.
All right. What I'm doing is showing you a puzzle that was fun to work on. I haven't solved it all, but a lot of fun to work on. Dr. Jake and his students have done really important work documenting the Turnpike and the knowledge about it. And all of that is slowly vanishing. turnpike itself, and local old-timers who know things about it are dying off. And so it's good to capture these things while you can. I think future researchers will build upon Jake and his students' excellent work, just as we built upon the work of Dr. Tom Lumsden and Dr. Jack Wynn. So in this slideshow, we're going to travel the turnpike from west to east, beginning at Unicoi Gap. And I'll show you sort of a summary of what we found. To produce this slideshow and to do a lot of this research, I used freely available tools that the average person can use. So I hope you like this. So how did this project get started? How about that? Back in December, I kept seeing these news stories about archaeological discoveries made using LiDAR scanning and mapping. This is a story about the discovery of a Roman fort in northern England. And here's a story from the Amazon River Basin, the discovery of a network of 35 villages that were completely hidden by forest. You can see the village on the right and the left, they're shaped like sunbursts. Very interesting finding. And here's an older story from New England. And it says LiDAR is not only a powerful tool on its own, it can also be used in conjunction with the many types of historical documents. And I thought, you know, wouldn't it be interesting to use LiDAR to examine Sokui and the Unicoi Turnpike? Dr. Tom and Jack Wynn had already laid the foundation for this, and on one of his history walks, I don't know, 2 decades ago, Dr. Lumsden took a group of us up to the Alec Mountain Stone Circle, and that just blew my mind because it's less than 2 miles from my house. Turnpike's about 1 mile from my house. And so sorry, this is did I go too far? There we go. All right. This was the slide. It was supposed to be up just a moment ago. Now, here we go. This is Dr. Tom's original map that he made of the turnpike across Habersham County. His approximation of the trail he drew in red across the county map of landlots, and that trail went right past the stone circle near Alec Mountain Gap. So back in December, I asked Dan Calhoun, my friend from the USGS, where to get LiDAR images and how much that would cost. And he told me that the data already exists and that they're freely available to the public. And I thought, wow, that's cool. And then another friend, Bruce Roberts, shared a link to the public LiDAR viewer. And I include that link in these presenter notes, which you'll get a copy of all this. So once I had that LiDAR viewer running, I immediately looked for the stone circle. And wow, you know, there it was, right in the middle of this image. It's just north of Alec Mountain Road and just northwest of the Alec Mountain Gap. That stone oval is massive. It has some rocks in it that I certainly could carry. At least 2 people would be needed. And so it's big, but it's eroded down, and nowhere is it more than about 2 feet tall. So that tells you how sensitive this LiDAR scan is. Another example is that you can see the Appalachian Trail almost anywhere that you look along its length in this public LiDAR viewer. Dan Calhoun told me that folks at the University of North Georgia might be interested in helping us, so I reached out to them, and Dr. Jake McDonald was excited to help. So Dr. Jake selected 2 interns for the project, and I asked for and received generous funding from the Saltina-Coochie Community Association History Committee and the White County Historical Society to pay the interns. And we met for our first hike on Monday, June 7, 2021. I drove us all up to Unicoi Gap, where we walked north down the Towns County side of the section of the turnpike, in rain that was heavy at times. So I'm showing you this map just to get you oriented. You can see Unicoi Gap up here at the top, and Helen, Georgia down here at the bottom. From the Gap to Helen is about 7.6 miles, and so far we've walked about 2.5 miles of that route. We did it when the interns could, in the full leaf of summer, so much remains to be observed. So this is a satellite view of our first walk. Unicoi Gap is at the bottom of this image, and right there, and we walked north alongside the Hiawassee River up to somewhere up in there, and we followed the old turnpike through the woods along the river. And here's that same area in the public LiDAR viewer with the topo map overlaying on it. This LiDAR viewer is a very cool tool. You can vary the transparency of the topo layer so that you can fade it in and out and see the LiDAR markings that are underneath it. Also, these topo lines are about 12 meters apart in elevation, but the LiDAR data allow you to plot 1 meter topo lines. It's very high resolution. Amazing that that's a public resource that we can use. I think it's great. So here's that same image with the topo layer fully transparent. I'm going to go back so you can do a little comparison there and get a few landmarks in your head and see where the rivers.
Point some of those landmarks out, Lord, please.
I will. See where the rivers are. I'm going to go right here and tell you that you can see two trails here to the west of the river. This is the river right here, and it's flowing this direction to the north. And you can see two trails, one close to the river and one over here. And this is the original turnpike here, close to the river, and it's real easy to discern that this is a much older trail than this one here, which was maybe an alternate turnpike route that was built at a later date. This trail over here to the east of the river, we think is a Forest Service road. It
is.
Yeah, it connects 2 or 3 wildlife openings there. So we proceeded to walk down the turnpike in this direction and got down pretty far. Hiking down that trail, there were huge tulip poplar trees, white oaks, beech trees, American holly, buckeyes, and yellow birches. The understory was so thick and lush that it was often hard to see your feet. So here are Dr. Jake and Caitlin and Brittany from left to right, standing on the turnpike just north of Unicoi Gap in the rain. And you're going to have to bear with me sometimes here. So here you can see the turnpike swale on the left. It's this, wrong button. It's this low place right in here. And this is a really massive berm. You can see the rocks on top of it. That they're walking along. And headwaters of the Hiawassee River over here on the right. So we're heading north, down the hill. And as you walk north from the gap, the turnpike seems like a little more than a footpath. But as we descended, it became deeper and wider and more eroded. And this tendency generally continues wherever we find the turnpike. The rock pile berms on each side of the old road are impressive. In some places, the rocks are boulder size, and it looks like the more rocks they removed out of the center of the roadway, the more appeared. And in a few places, the road had become a small intermittent stream, and in a couple of other places, the east-flowing tributaries of the Hiawassee River had eroded the old road. So we explored about a mile of the turnpike down to the third feeder stream that crosses it from west to east. And using the LiDAR data, Jake had marked about 30 GPS points on a topographic map. And we visited all but the lowest 2 down near Indian Grave Gap Road. So that was a nice outing. we were all soaking wet when we got back, and I had by that time walked through more knee-deep poison ivy than I'd ever walked through in my entire life. So we got some good advice about washing that stuff off, and nobody got any trouble from it, so that was great. So 2 days later, on June 9, we drove to Matt Gedney's house in Helen, where David Greer joined us. This is David here, and this is Matt, and there's Jake and Brittany and Kate. And so Matt is the author of Living on the Unicoi Road, which is about the history of the road itself, especially through Helen. And he talked to us about local history, and he showed us 3 places that he thinks are remnants of the turnpike. The first one, let me just show you these red UT labels. That's what I use to mark my approximation of the turnpike. So here it comes down through here and then through Helen. The first of Matt's 3 places was the south end of Ridge Road. Ridge Road is coming out right down through here. And there we stopped and looked, and there is a river tubing concession there now with a deck. And but that used to be the northwest end of a diagonal ford, a long diagonal ford of the river that emerged about where the Hofbräu House restaurant is today. Matt's second place was a short and really deep ravine that was, I think it was on this side of the creek, south side of the creek, and it was right there, that he thought might be a remnant of the turnpike. And the third section is this one up here, and it starts at the entrance to the cemetery, and it's about 1,800 feet long, and heads north from the entrance to the cemetery. So here I've zoomed in on that. The 1,800 foot section is clearly visible there, this one here, and it offered a much easier route than taking your wagon down the river and going through this gorge, which would have been rough, very narrow, very steep sides. So that's a mark in favor of this actually being the turnpike. This road appears to have been worked on at some point by a bulldozer, because it doesn't have the characteristic, berms and swale of the old undisturbed turnpike. But anyway, this is a photo of us walking that section. We're headed north, and the Chattahoochee River is down the hill on the left. So we thanked Matt for sharing his time and knowledge, and we drove up to Poplar Stump Road as far as where Spokane Creek enters the Chattahoochee River, looking for signs of the old turnpike and potential sites for fording the river. And those were pretty scarce, but it is summer, so going back in the winter could help things. We then headed up to Unicoi Gap, and David Greer took this picture of us, and then we turned around and walked that way and got on the turnpike and walked it to the south. So Unicoi Gap is at the top of this image right here, and it's really steep and rough country, lots of down trees from storms. We walked down the highway and got on this road and then went in here. And Spokane Creek, basically is the route of the turnpike, but not an easy place to go. A lot of elevation change there. So this is the same area on the topo and LiDAR. And here's the LiDAR image alone. All right, so I'm going to go back and let you kind of see that you can actually see both LiDAR and topo at the same time. So the turnpike opened for traffic as a toll road in about 1818, as Dr. Jack said, and it appeared on all the 1819 landlocked survey maps for Habersham County, which then included White County and I think part of Stevens County. So you can see several routes approaching the gap, and you can see these multiple routes in these switchbacks further south. This right here, this dark spot, is a falls. I think it's what was the name of that? Let's go back. Harmony Hill Falls, and so we observed that on steeper slopes, the turnpike eroded more rapidly and exposing more rocks and obstacles, and it branched more often. So we assumed this was because travelers made new routes as the old ones wore out. A 2012 academic paper that I found investigated a Confederate encampment along the Unicoi Turnpike just south of Tellico Plains, Tennessee. And it said that by 1850, the Unicoi Turnpike was essentially defunct and had been described as one of the worst roads in the country. So they wore it out. They wore it out pretty quick. All right, so the turnpike was hard to see at times and then quite obvious in other places. So all of these photos contain location data, and this is just heading down from the gap. So just south of the gap and near the highway, there was these large boulders sitting in the middle of the turnpike, and I suspect they either rolled down or flew there, blasted by the construction uphill. We walked the switchbacks in the turnpike that descend that steep hill just west of Harmony Hill Falls. And at the bottom of the switchbacks, we crossed the first significant feeder stream from the west. It was really hard to imagine how they got wagons across that stream. We turned around at that point, which was nearly a mile below the gap. From there, it's about another mile south to the former Dyer property, which we hope to get permission to visit. So Jake and Brittany and Caitlin recorded lots of GPS data. So this image is from acrevalue.com, a website that I like to use, which shows property boundaries. Unicoi Gap's up here at the top, and the former Dyer property is this area right here. It's on the west side of the highway. Andrews Creek comes down just through here and joins the Spoil Cane Creek near the bottom of this property, and this is where one of the last turnpike toll houses supposedly was located. So zooming out, south of the Dyer property, there's about a mile of Forest Service land. And then the private property begins again right here. Most of this mile should be easily accessible from the turnouts on the side of Highway 17. You just have to walk through the creek to get over to it.
It's just straight up and down to get out into it, though.
Well, no, actually, it's really pretty easy right through here. It's not a deep climb.
That's flat. That's flat out down there.
I must be looking.
Yeah,
Got pretty good.
yeah, it does flatten out pretty well in there. So the next place we visited, and I'm doing this out of order chronologically in order to keep it in order geographically, and so we can continue to walk through this thing. Was right here, Chris Thacker's property, and we got permission to go there. And on June 23rd, the four of us drove to that place, and we parked. Now I can't see my little road. Here it is. This little driveway right here. We turned off the highway, went across the creek on this little driveway, and we parked about right here. And immediately didn't see anything turnpike looking over here, so we walked over and found the turnpike at the base of this hill and followed it up. There was, once we hit this spot, we got into a tangled mess, and it was down trees, huge amounts of mountain dog hobble. We had to go up, had to go up this valley and turn around and come back because it was so full of down trees. And then we came out right here and started walking, and no turnpike. So we kind of lost it there for a while. So we found it again higher up the valley. Here's just the plain LiDAR. So we crossed this thing and went up here and found the turnpike right here. And then we headed all the way up through here and all the way up to this wide spot, which there is a power line easement there. And it appeared the turnpike may have gone under that power line easement, and it was grown up so thick there was no way that we could get through there, densely overgrown and pretty much impassable. So that's where we turned around. On the way back south, we did a little better job of following the turnpike. So as the valley widens out right here, the turnpike stays close to the creek, and then it becomes a deep straight cut right here. And then it abruptly takes a 90-degree right turn to the west, and in a really deep excavation. So there's water flowing through it, coming from the west, going this direction. It's a deep ditch, and viewed from the south down here, it's a really steep, the southern berm is really steep and about 12 feet tall. It was impressive. You know, one possibility is that they took this dog leg to avoid this bog, which was very clearly a wetland. We didn't even need to walk in it to see that. The other possibility is they were doing something weird with drainage, trying to get this stuff to the creek and dry out this wetland. But in any case, that's about the only place we saw that the turnpike could be going. So we went over here, turned and went down and got back on the thing there on the turnpike. So here's David Greer standing in the middle of that east-west jog. He's looking east, and that's the water that was flowing through it, a really deep ditch. So it would be great to go back in the winter. It would be great to get Jake to fly his high-tech drone over this and map it, you know, down to 6-inch resolution or something, but we'll see. So the next 3 slides, I'm jumping further east to show you something interesting about property boundaries. This is a satellite image just north of Clarksville. Bethlehem Baptist Church is at the bottom right. Oops, wrong button. Here we are, sorry. We'll scoot ahead if you hold the button down. This is Bethlehem Baptist Church. This is Highway 197. You're north of Clarksville. This is Alec Mountain Road, going back toward to Habersham County. So the turnpike mostly follows Alec Mountain Road all the way back to the Gap, Alec Mountain Gap. But can you spot the turnpike in this picture? So during the June 1st meeting with the White County Historical Society, Justin Sutton told me of a gully north of Clarksville that his father and his grandfather and his great-grandfather identified as the turnpike. The LiDAR indication looked good when I looked at it, and the route was right where the historical account said it should be. So I drove to the eastern end of the track on Sunday, June 6th, at the north corner of the cemetery. This cemetery right here, here's the north corner. And the turnpike was clearly evident. And there was a concrete property boundary marker in the center of it. The bushes in there were really dense, so I didn't try to walk it, and I didn't have permission. So when I got home, I found that the LiDAR trace was about 3,600 feet in length and exactly marked the boundaries for 7 properties, which is probably why it remains undisturbed. One usually can't bulldoze your neighbor's property lines. So this also suggested that property lines are clues to locate the turnpike, which was one of the earliest landmarks and handy to choose as a property boundary. I think there's a good chance this is the longest undisturbed section of turnpike in Habersham County. So here are the property boundaries in yellow. So can you see the turnpike now? Yeah, all right. Next,
Where?
we'll go back to it. You see it now? Okay, let me jump back. Okay, it goes from here all the way down through there, and it actually comes out down this road here to the through the graveyard and into this church parking lot. That was very cool to find that. I thought, man, I really found something here. So I go home and I look again at Jake's just off the cuff draft map of the turnpike, and he'd already identified that section as the turnpike from Gainesville, from his office in Gainesville, and you know, dang, he beat me to it. So let's see. There's the. All right, I want you to notice all this terracing. See all these terraces that have been done here. First, there was a cotton mania, and then there was the apple mania, and then there was maybe the soil conservation mania. I don't know, but they terraced a lot of stuff, and that erased a lot of the turnpike. I think in this next section to the east, which I think is a big mystery area. So on Monday, June 14, Mary and Chris Guidell joined the four of us. Mary is Dr. Tom Lumsden's daughter. This was a long, large, hot day. We went first to Nora Mill and looked at a spot that Matt Gedney had described as a turnpike on the hill across the road from the mill.
That's right.
And there may be faint traces of the old road there, which it seems passed very close to the Martin house. We went up in the woods behind the Martin house, and it looked like a chunk of that road got taken out in this deep excavation that is right across from the Nora Mill Dam. So it looked to me like they'd dug a bunch of fill dirt out, including part of the turnpike, and used it in the dam, but that's my speculation. So the next stop as we headed east along the turnpike toward Clarksville was Hardman Farm, and that's shown in this picture. So they are standing in the turnpike. They were good enough to put the gravel road to the house over here and not here. So you got an original piece of turnpike sitting there that's very well preserved. The turnpike originally went down and around the east side of the house, but it was later moved to the west side of the house between those rows of big black walnut trees that you've probably seen from the highway. So here's the LiDAR and topo view of this area. The turnpike came down, went originally this side of the house, and then somewhere over here. We couldn't see where it went once we got to here. East of the Sokui Mound, there's an Indian mound, and east of that, I think this is a remnant of the turnpike going around the end of this hill. The highway department cut a pretty deep swale through there, and bigger than what the wagons needed. So you can see this from the little overlook where you can park and look at the mound, take pictures. You can see this swale sitting out there, and it's got cattle feeders on it, and it's a handy flat place for them to feed their cows. But take a look at it sometime. It is a tendency for the highway to cut through hills and for the old turnpike to go around and follow the contour. So from there until Wright Road down here, it seems that the turnpike is mostly under the state highway. So we then walked Wright Road, which loops north off the modern highway. Berms and remnants of the turnpike were evident on both sides of this public road. And further east, thanks to Mary Goddell, we had permission to enter some private property here in Hemlock Lane and over near Dr. Tom's house, former Lumsden property. So we got to walk through there and observe the turnpike passing through there. We then parked near Garland-Bristol Road, which is right next to the fire station in Saltee there. And we walked along that stone wall that you can see next to the highway that bordered the north edge of the turnpike. And more than half of the turnpike was removed right there by the highway. So in this picture, the Glenn Kennemer Tucker house is on the left, and the state highway is out of sight over this little hill on the right. And we're walking east toward the Saltee Inn.
Mm-hmm.
So the red UT symbols here depict this area right here. This is the little area we're walking in. That picture was taken. So LiDAR suggests the turnpike from there passed just north of the highway. I think this is a trace of it right here. And I have permission to get in there and walk that. It's on the Mott property. I just haven't done it yet. Maybe winter will give some good opportunities to do that. Now, just east of the old Saltee store, right in here, is a good place, an easy place to show people about 150 feet of the northern edge of the turnpike. But the highway took most of the southern side. We next parked just west of the Saltee Creek Bridge. The map keeps labeling this Chickamauga Creek, but it's not, it's Saltee Creek. And this is where the new highway made a deep cut through this hill. So I had long suspected that the turnpike went around the hill rather than, certainly didn't cut through the hill. And so we stopped there and climbed up and found about 400 feet of well-preserved turnpike, sort of crossing that hill up a little higher than I thought. I thought it would be at the base, but it's up here somewhere. And the turnpike then crossed Saltee Creek. Jake thinks they might have gone upstream a little ways to make that crossing. And then it went through the old Joe Brown Pikes industrial area right here, and then headed on toward the east, north of the highway. So here's the crew standing on the turnpike on top of that little hill just west of Saltee Creek. I was surprised to find that. That was really cool. You see this stuff on LiDAR and it's kind of faint, and you think, is that it? And you go out there and walk up the hill, and it's like, that's it. So from there, we stopped in the driveway of the Williams property, which is right here. The driveway comes out right here. And we observed the turnpike on both sides of the driveway. The driveway pretty well wiped it out right there. I'm going to, right here, skip around some more in the chronology in order to keep heading east on this turnpike. Because at that point, we'd found far more of the turnpike than I had expected. And I didn't have all the permissions that we needed. So at a later date, I came back alone and walked across the highway from the end of Muscadine Drive here and followed these LiDAR indications, which suggested that the turnpike traveled a straight line down to Malden Mill Creek, where this old mill site was here. The mill was destroyed in the 1994 Palm Sunday tornado, and I didn't get down there to look at it before it was destroyed. A friend of mine told me it was cool and there was a lot of old equipment and stuff in there. And then whoever owned it cleaned it all up, so it's been erased. But as I followed this old roadway down through here, it became sort of atypical. It was over 40 feet wide, flat, straight, contained by ditches and berms. This area needs more study. It almost looked like the highway department had decided to put the highway there and then changed their mind. But this is the clearest photo I have of that section. You can see how wide it is. it looks comparatively new because there are a few big trees in the middle of it. So that's a puzzle, but it's a puzzle I wouldn't have found without the LiDAR. There's no boundary lines on that property except for right before it hits the creek. It's a boundary line. So, headed east, our groups get past another promising LiDAR signature that I visited later. The trace begins up here, where it's just east of the intersection of Highway 17, which is this one, and 255 alternate, which is this one. And it trends southeast and passes behind the new Dollar General store, which they cut into this hill right here, and then turns almost due south and comes all the way down to the driveway for the fire station. I mean, right at the culvert of the driveway. And so I had long thought that this loop over here to the west of the highway was the turnpike, because there was an old store right in here that had a porch that was just right on the road. It looked like, well, that's a great place for the turnpike to be. But here's where the property boundary discovery north of Clarksville became even more useful. So, the turnpike forms a property boundary on the east side of Highway 17, but Lindsay Circle does not. So I think this is good evidence for the validity of the route behind the Dollar General. On Friday, June 18, I parked at the Dollar General store right here and just kind of snuck back in the woods. And walked down here and found the turnpike very quickly at the base of the hill. And I walked about 100 feet of it in that area. I then drove around here to the fire station and parked and explored the southeast end of that section, which is deeper and contains tires and junk, probably from the old gas station that preceded the Dollar General. So the next two slides are photos taken where you see the red numbers, 1 and 2. This is photo number 1, just behind the Dollar General, looking northwest. And here is photo number 2, very near the fire station driveway and looking northwest. Pretty deep, pronounced cut there. So back to our group, we continued east from where were we? Over in Saltee, and we turned onto Amy's Creek Road and drove to Amy's Creek Baptist Church. This is where Mary showed us the route that her father, Dr. Tom, had shown her. This is Amy's Creek Church, and the turnpike is a slight swale visible going right through this cemetery. There are no graves in the middle of it, but the swale is quite visible. There are graves on one side and graves on the other side, but none in the middle. From the fire station back up here, I've marked my guess at where the turnpike is based on property boundaries. This was a huge hill that the DOT removed and used when they improved Highway 17, I guess. So the turnpike could have gone around here. I can't imagine any other reason for these property boundaries like this to be there. If the turnpike had gone around this side of that hill, all this would be erased. You'd never see it. No way you're going to find it. But in this, in this LiDAR and topo of the same area, you can see in here these little indications of, they look like, ditches, the remainder of ditches. And I think that's a likely possibility for the turnpike. And then at this point, it crosses the road and then heads down here to the church. And you can see the turnpike clearly evident here, here, and over here. So from there, the LiDAR and the property lines suggest the turnpike closely followed Amy's Creek Road, which is this one, and it turns into Alec Mountain Road at some nebulous point there. And this is Amos Creek coming down through here. So it followed that road, Amos Creek Road, until just before this Amos Creek, when a LiDAR track suddenly coincides with about a 2,000-foot straight line right through there. So here's that 2,000-foot property boundary. We didn't have permission to walk that boundary line on that day, so I'm skipping ahead to July 17 when I returned with the property owners. There's more detail in my journal account, but in brief, the turnpike is the southern boundary of the Smiths' property. So we walked across the top of a purported Native American mound from north to south, and we found a possible turnpike section here on the southwest side. The crossing at Amos Creek is washed out, as you'd expect, but the old road's plainly evident after that. This has not been walked. We don't know. This is just my estimation of what might be the most likely path there. But this thing was pretty fascinating. Do I have a? I don't have a. Yeah, there you go. This one. All right. So deep woods here, wooded here. Turnpike's in good condition. Right here, this property owner here bulldozed it and flattened it so he could park his equipment. Possibly with the permission from the other landowner, I don't know, but in any way, it's been erased a little bit through here. But in here, it's in great shape, and in here, it's in good shape. All right, so that's a 2,000-foot straight line, and here is sorry, I'm getting lost. All right, there's the property boundaries. Here we go. So we walked across the top of that purported mound and then headed up here. Notice the stone circle right up here. Can you see it? All right, and here's the gap, which is the high point. So on both sides of the gap, the road began branching. And you can see the branches here. I've marked every bit of the turnpike, but I haven't marked the county road. What happened here was when we got into this, we suddenly realized there were two turnpikes there. They were side by side. And right in this area, through here, I think, they're like separated by this big backbone of country rock, and you can walk down that easier than you can walk in either roadway on either side. So they'd worn out one roadway and put another one right beside it, and then as we approaching the county road up here, those two routes turn southeast and they diverge. One crosses uphill to the north side of the county road and heads toward the gap. That's this one up here, and the other one stays on the lower side of the county road and disappears under the county road right about here. So the two tracks were evident approaching this gap, and as we saw on Spokane Creek, it seems that steep grades were more likely to erode and produce alternate routes. So that same morning, we got permission to walk the next lot to the east, this area over here, and which includes a stretch of the turnpike east of the gap. We followed it, and then east and then south down the hill, right here. And it's very clear and distinctive and classically shaped right in through there. You can almost see it from the county road. If you're coming up right here, you get a view of it right through there. There are two deep LiDAR signatures here to the north and west of or north and east of the county road, and Jack Wynn had already noted those things and observed them with Dr. Tom. Y'all may have even found this thing, I'm not sure. But in any case, we walked about 3,500 feet of the turnpike in that area. Some of the old roads have been erased in the pasture area, and it's interrupted by the county road, so it doesn't beat that 3,600 foot section west of Bethlehem Baptist Church for the longest uninterrupted stretch of the turnpike in Habersham County. So from Amy's Creek Church, our group headed east on Alec Mountain Road to the cemetery at Bethlehem Baptist Church, and I showed him the end of that 3,600 foot section that Justin Sutton had shown me, and Justin then took us across and along the edges of the turnpike. This section has the characteristic look. It's a swale between big shoulders, but it's really hard to photograph and nearly impossible to walk because of the thick bushes. So we followed it, the old road northwest, all the way to where it crossed Sutton Mill Creek, and there must have been a bridge there because the old road seemed to end at a deep spot in the creek and then just pick up again right straight across on the other side. So Justin wanted to visit the Alec Mountain Stone Circle, so we headed back to Alec Mountain Gap, where a group assembled on the turnpike, took this photo, and then walked to the Stone Circle with permission. It was a long, hot, and a good day. So east of Bethlehem Church in Clarksville is what I call the mystery area. I got some indications here of a possible route, and that goes along Glade Creek Road and Wall Bridge Road, first Wall Bridge Road and then Glade Creek Road on the way to Antioch Church over here. Deep Creek joins the Sokui River right above the word joins right there. That's where those two are come together, and that area is described as the site of Mr. Adair's house, which was on or near the turnpike, and it hosted travelers. The LiDAR traces are really scarce in this area. I've spent hours staring at it, and I think we're going to need better local information to ever pin down that route. So now we're going to move eastward to Antioch Church. Antioch Baptist Church is mentioned many times in connection to the turnpike. I marked 3 LiDAR traces along here that where it appears the turnpike passed by the church, and from there it appears the turnpike pretty much followed Antioch Church Road and then past Mount Bethel Community Church right here. So I've marked LiDAR traces on both sides here where it passed by the church, and also this curve up here north of the highway that turns right into Benden Hickory Road, also called Glore Road, which is the western end of it is where we started our walk with Kelly Vickers of Tacoma Falls College on Monday, July 26th. So on that Monday, Caitlin and Brittany and I met at the college with Kelly Vickers. Kelly is an alumni. He was there for the dam break and the flood. He's a resident historian and he's registrar for the college. We had an interesting talk in his office, and then we walked the 4+ miles of Bull Road all the way back down here and above the falls and down, coming out right above the dormitories, right down here. So Kelly shared far more stories in history than I can relate to you now, but there's more details in my journal which I'm happy to share. He has lots of historical information about the turnpike and Toccoa Falls College and the history there. So here Kelly and Caitlin and Brittany at Toccoa Falls before the hike, and here they are on Glower Road near the beginning of the hike,
Yeah.
up at the north east end. And at several points, this turnpike got as deep as I've seen it anywhere. It was a lot of use and a lot of erosion. They fenced out part of it now to keep the four-wheelers out, which should slow down the erosion.
The erosion in the 20 years or so has dropped it down about 8 feet.
Yeah.
It's just dramatic,
Yeah.
terrible erosion.
And all that dirt is in Lake Hartwell. So Jake's map here, this is a portion of a large poster that I was hoping to be here tonight. I'm going to get you a copy of it for you to have. Anyway, his map shows yellow medium confidence routes, and the red are low confidence routes. Mm-hmm. So this is the one that pretty much that we walked that day down to Toccoa Falls, and Kelly even took us through the campus out toward the lower end of the campus and showed us where he thinks the turnpike went, which was also the path of the floodwaters from the dam break. So of these low confidence routes, you got the lower route ends at Traveler's Rest, which is a historic inn that was said to be on or near the turnpike. I took my first visit there this year. I should have gone much earlier. It's a really neat place. The upper of these two red routes hits the Tugaloo River out here at the site of a Native American mound that is still visible as a small island in the lake. So LiDAR suggested that upper route might have followed Owl Swamp Road here, and then Gus Turnball Road, and out, and onto the Tugaloo River floodplain, which was the site of a Native American village, and thus the mound. Kelly tells a fantastic story about a chief who was buried in that mound. His body was excavated, stored at the college. He was there for the flood. This incredible story. I'd love to see Kelly do a presentation. The guy's absolutely loaded with facts. So notice that this LiDAR map shows features that are under the water, including a possible turnpike route that vanishes under the water, right there. So what's next? Maybe sonar. Who knows? In Hiawassee, Lake Chattooge has covered much of the turnpike since 1942. That's nearly 80 years with no bulldozers. A sonar survey might reveal some good evidence. There's lots more out there to be found, and all it takes is curiosity. So I'm including a link in my notes to this public LiDAR viewer webpage, and if you get it, I hope you'll take a look around, because you know it's worth doing. So I'm going to give you one more example here that I'm going to end up with, and this is not really turnpike related, but it sort of is. So on the left here, we see the Kennemer Mound in Sawtee, which I've already mentioned. It's been excavated and studied and written up in a couple of papers. Highway 17 is up here on the north, and the Chattahoochee River is out of the picture down south and up here on the west, back here somewhere. So this image on the right is what I'm calling the Sokui Mound. It's in the Hardeman Bottoms, north of Clarksville. It's about maybe 2.6 times larger than Kennemer on top, and to my knowledge it has not been studied. It has the Sokui River to the west and to the south. So if this is indeed a flattened mound like Kennemer, this one, in the Unicoi Valley and the Hardin Bottoms have 5 features in common. They have several Native American mounds in the valley. They have a flattened hilltop mound. They have Hardman family properties. The old stone house at the Sokui site is gone, but I walked in the ruins in the 1970s before it was bulldozed. They have nearly identical spring boxes with carved stone arched lintels, and they have nearly identical spring houses, both with diamond-shaped windows that are wider than they all are tall, and I think they both have holes in the floor where you can lower your milk down and keep it cool. So, you know, this was the site of a pretty large village. There's a good chance the original Unicoi Trail went through this site, but that the turnpike did not, maybe. I don't know. Lots of stuff to explore and look around and figure out and find, and all it takes is curiosity. So I just want to thank you all for having me here, and I'll try to answer any questions you got. Now's when I really wish Jake was here.
One thing you didn't mention is those 2 girls found out about yellow jackets.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was back up there where we were in that cut going through the east-west cut. Where I got a picture of David standing in it. Yeah, we got tangled up in yellow jackets, and it was rough, and you couldn't run.
That's what they said.
You couldn't run at all. We were, you know, tangled in bushes, and I have to say that I was extremely impressed with those 2 young ladies. They were troopers. I never heard a word of complaint from either one of them, and I'd hike anywhere with them pretty much. They were easy and easygoing. They were very interested in what they were doing. I think they're going to be great researchers for somebody in the future. Yes?
You've been talking about the Unicoi Turnpike, and then you just talked about the Unicoi Trail.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference?
The trail we'll never find, because there's no, you know, it's just a footpath.
It was strictly a pack horse trail.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's ancient, far older than the turnpike, maybe 1,000 years, who knows? And it was the main way through the mountains there. So the trail predates the turnpike. I'm sure the turnpike sits on the trail in some places, and but we'll never find exactly where the trail was. And the local knowledge about a lot of this stuff, you know, if we could have gathered it 100 years ago, we'd have gotten a lot more. Now it's being forgotten, and the people who know about it are passing on, and the stuff is vanishing. It's good to get in and record as much of it as we can while we can. So.
And did the southeastern end of the turnpike begin at Traveler's Rest?
Kelly Vickers doesn't know. We don't know for sure. There's several places it could have begun. The Owl Creek, the Owl Swamp Road looks interesting because it heads to that Indian village. Perhaps the old foot trail went there, and perhaps the turnpike went somewhere else. But we don't know. We do know that a lot of travelers stopped at Traveler's Rest and described it in historical accounts. So there's points for both views, and I'm not historian enough to sort it out. But I loved working with this puzzle and finding these things, especially the ones that are, you know, pieces of the turnpike that are a mile from my house that I don't think anybody had recognized. That was really neat. So.
When did it fall into disuse, or did it stop being used
Yeah, well,
as a railroad? Or?
By 1850, as I said, it was pretty bad shape, and by then, lots of other roads had been built. I mean, they were building roads like crazy during that period, and the railroads came pretty soon. So I think it got abandoned probably 18 late 1840s, 1850s.
Who, built,
That may be true up there in Tennessee, but here in Georgia, it seems to have been taken over by Highway 17 and 75.
Right.
It gradually, the last portion, there was a turnpike, was that part over the Unicoi Gap. But it was gradually taken over by Georgia DOT with those two roads.
Right.
And what you found are the pieces they didn't use,
Right.
which was really neat, because now we can go back and get them.
And see them, yeah.
One of the things I was going to say historically, we found the contracts for the building of the thing, and one of the specifications is it was to be built 20 feet wide everywhere except where it had to be bridged or some sort of a build-up had to be done to cross like the swampy spot.
Right.
Probably. And what has happened is all the traffic has worn it down, so you have these deep gaps, and deep ditches, and that's what you're seeing on your LiDAR.
Right.
It was big enough so you could, it was big enough so you could see
Yeah.
it.
It's a lot bigger than the Appalachian Trail, which you can see most of, yeah.
But no, this was supposed to be a 2-lane road, so you could pass
Right.
wagons and herds of animals.
Yeah. The wagons were about 6 feet wide back then, at the most.
Yeah, and they also had very high wheels.
Yeah.
We found a contract like that for a trail over in Mississippi that specified that all the tree stumps had to be cut down less than 2 feet so that the high wheel axles could pass over them.
Yeah.
So I don't think of that as a very clear road bed, but they thought it was enough. Yeah.
Are those contracts available for the public to read? The written?
To be honest with you, I can't remember now exactly where I got them, but we could probably chase them down if you wanted to.
Okay.
I'd like to talk about a change in culture. In 1815, 1818, the turnpike was the way to go. And 1822 or so, Clarksville was formed.
Yeah.
And then a new road from Amy Creek intersection to Clarksville superseded the old turnpike. So cultural change moved the way you travel.
Right.
Now, and there's another historical aspect of that moving you're talking about. The thing was advertised to be open for use from Fort Loudon to Toccoa in 1818, and then in 1828 we had the discovery of gold down here, and instead of just regular settlers, you had 10,000 would-be gold miners pouring down the road and taking a left and coming over here. So it got a totally different cultural use there.
Right.
So it was only about 10 years before that mob hit here.
Kelly Vickers says he has some written accounts of travelers on the turnpike, and I've asked him to share them, but I'm going to have to pester him again about it.
Yeah.
But I would love to read some of those.
Oh, I
because
would too.
If there aren't any, that's an excellent setting for some historical fiction.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
so these contracts, is that with private companies or?
Well, I don't know exactly how it was handled. There were 4 Anglo businessmen who basically headed it up. And we think, well, I should say I think, they probably contracted with individual Indians or groups of Indians to build sections of it. There weren't very many slaves up here anyway, so there would even be the white local people or the Indians who still lived in the area. Remember, this thing was going through Indian territory for a good section of its existence.
And you have one follow-up question? Was anybody in charge of maintaining the road, or?
It's a toll road, so whoever charged the toll had to maintain it.
Okay, because I have some Scottish ancestors up in Virginia, and supposedly they would, to the landowners or whatever, they would parcel out, the responsibility to keep the roads up or whatever.
With a similar arrangement in Georgia. You had a road commissioner there from Militia District. He'd organize a working crew after laying by, and that's when they do the roads up.
Any super special archaeological finds?
In this,
Or
most,
in your,
I mean, we took our walks, but, you know, the poison ivy was this tall. And we found, south of Unicoi Gap, we found some concrete work, looked like it was either picnic tables or gate posts with bolts coming out of standing concrete posts.
The picnic area that was closed years ago.
Maybe so, yeah. And then further down, we found a stone, it was like a water box maybe, but it was, and it had a concrete slab on the top of it. The corner was broken, and the interior of it was full of soil. So it could have been a water box. Water boxes typically fill up with sediment over time. But there are some interesting things there. There's a flat area right up near the gap that it's been flattened for something, and Jack and I talked about that a little bit. I'd like to go back and see that in the winter when it's clear. In December when we started talking about this, I should have gone to walk. I waited until summer.
Alan, the borrow pit of the Kennemer Mound is evident with the wavy, odd topos. On the other site, there doesn't seem to be that. Do you think they flattened it and smoothed it better?
Are you calling this the borrow pit?
Uh-huh.
No, that was not a borrow pit. That's natural contours there.
Okay.
This was just a taller hill, and they pushed the dirt off to the sides and flattened it, got it not level, but
And that's about an acre on the top or slightly more.
yeah, I think it's I measured it the other day, but I just to know that this is about 2.6 times the size of that.
That's neat.
And this thing, I can't believe I missed it, because I've walked all through this valley back in the 70s, and you know, up through here and the whole thing, but never saw this. It's you can see it on Google satellite, and they've kept the top of it mowed, and they've got a kind of a tractor road into here, but there's no improved road at all. There's no way you could put a chicken house there. And the perimeter of it, the steep parts, are grown up in trees, big trees. So I think this might be the 1 meter topo resolution here.
That's neat.
There were several mounds in this valley out here, and the valley gets much bigger out here to the east. I think now it's a turf farm. So
To answer the person's question over here, so far as I know, there hasn't been any planned archaeology along the turnpike. I'm an archaeologist. I would love to have been able to do some, but our principal idea in our original thing was like yours, to find the thing.
to find it, yeah.
Yeah, and we were restricted in large part to national forest land.
Right.
So we didn't have access to landowners, or problem with questions about landowners' access and so on. But I'm just tickled pink that you've gotten this far along on this and gotten this much information. And the technology 20 years later certainly helped a lot.
Yeah.
But, I wish I'd had that kind
Oh,
of data when I was doing this.
Yeah, it was really gratifying to find some of those things. And
Oh, yeah.
they're so close to my house, and a piece of history running right by there.
Well, Dr. Tom Lumsden was a big help for me, as it was for you. And the fact that the thing ran right through his front yard was kind of neat. He lived on that thing all his life.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing that he brought out was that his brother lives up in the Maryville, Tennessee area on the other end of the turnpike. So the brothers kind of bracketed the thing, and they've been interested in it since they were kids.
Right.
he said he'd been mowing that stretch all of his life, you know, but there's a piece of it alongside of his house that had never been cleared off, and you could see the square shape of the ground. where
He was a great resource.
Oh, he's an excellent resource.
The last time I talked to him, it was not long before he died, but I called him on the phone and asked him who to talk to find out how to get up to the Hickory Nut Mountain petroglyph. And he told me exactly who to go talk to. I took several people up there with me. It was amazing to find this Indian petroglyph on this rock, which just never knew that kind of thing was out here in this area. Jack, did you have a question?
Well, I was just curious about the LiDAR, it's technical. Is it aerial? Is that how they get these images, or is it?
They flew this on a plane, and I think they did this one in 2008, and they did another one in, I believe, 2016, but something was wrong, and the data they gathered were useless, so we didn't get the updated version. We're working with the old stuff.
Old being 2008.
Yeah, way back.
So basically how it works is they shine this laser light down. It's not a coherent beam, but it's like a cone shape of light. And they record what gets reflected back up. And the time that it takes this light to come back is measured very precisely. So the earliest reflections are the tops of the trees. Middle reflections are in the middle somewhere, bushes or whatever, and the last reflections to come back up are the ground.
Density is part of that? Yeah.
Might be. I think it's just light. It's just light.
Light.
Yeah, and they measure the time coming back up. I have no idea how it could see under the lake.
Yeah, that's what kind of blew my mind. Like, wait a minute.
The light goes through the water.
Well, it might.
Yeah,
It might.
it does.
Yeah.
It's transparent.
I might add,
Unless it's money.
LiDAR, you can
Yeah,
actually
right.
see foundations of
But it's
old
still
buildings.
transparent.
Yeah.
Under the lake, maybe? Or old buildings, anyway.
Yeah.
To the light.
Well, Jake says there are people at University of North Georgia that do sonar work, and I think there's something even better than sonar now. So maybe somebody will map Lake Chatouche one day, and we'll find the turnpike down there. Yeah, that would be fun. So.
Thank you very much for coming. We've enjoyed it.
Give Alan a copy of, he's our guest speaker, you're going to give him a copy, after Dr. McDonald, since he wasn't here, a copy of our hand inch report. I think it's kind of like along the same lines of what we were talking about here. This was done just prior to the Civil War, a survey that was, what kind of thing?
Very cool. I'll make sure that Jake gets his copy. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.